Hello again. Welcome back inside the Tier 4 studio here in Morgantown, West Virginia for 24/7 Sports. I am Mike Casazza. This is our weekly football question and answer here on Facebook Live. Back after an off week. Of course, no game last week, so no chat last week. Some things happened or maybe didn't happen in between. And we tried to fill the space as best as we could during the time between games, but frankly, the time has come for a new game now, which gives us plenty more to consider here, and it's a pretty appetizing game here. West Virginia on the road, ranked, by the way, but a almost 2-touchdown underdog against TCU. Two teams who came into the Big 12 at the same time have followed similar trajectory in their past 5+ seasons in the league. Right now, though, TCU seems to have rediscovered the touch that perhaps brought the Horned Frogs to the cusp of the college football playoff a couple years ago. Really good offense, prolific with points, balanced in the stats, and the defense, always the calling card for Gary Patterson. Not quite as good this season, especially when you look at some of the passing yardage and the big plays that TCU has given up, something I chronicled online today. Just a preview for you if you want to go back and take a look at it. TCU's given up the most 30-yard passing plays in the Big 12 among the bottom 20 in the country. That's kind of unusual, but explosive plays have happened so far, and that has been West Virginia's calling card on offense, and that's a good way to move the ball. Going to be hard to drive and sustain drives and convert third downs against TCU. You'd like to be able to hit a home run every so often, and if you remember a couple years ago, West Virginia lost badly, 40-10, but how many touchdown passes have the Mountaineers dropped? West Virginia has beaten TCU. Same defense, really. Same players last year in some regards. Same coaching style. Very specific tactic in the back end. They do pattern matching where you play a zone defense, and then when you recognize the route and you see somebody coming and something you saw on tape and studied and you recognize it, you jump on it or you pass it to the defender next to you and he jumps on it, and you make sure you're never caught out of position and people don't get open. West Virginia has succeeded against that in the past. They'll have to do that Saturday, and they'll have to hit some big plays because if you want to have 16-play drives, 4 or 5 times probably, that's going to be hard to do against that defense. So my preview of the preview that's still upcoming here, we'll also talk a little bit about how first down will probably be the way to decide this game, but that's later in the week. For now, I have about 15 minutes, and it seems like just about as many questions that I will answer from you. And I will start here in the room right now. Raymond Bogish, sorry, I can't talk. Like Dana said, let's just go play a game. Bye week seems like it's lasted too long. I would agree. He also asks, have you also heard anything about David Long's return? He traveled to Kansas, which means they probably thought he had a chance. He did not play. I don't think he's regressed. Certainly the time off had to be a benefit for him. It's just another week for him to rehab and to get into shape. Apparently he's been running. His conditioning is fine. He's reached top speed, which is important when you're working with a knee injury. You got to be able to let it go. So I guess he's been cleared for all that. He's been practicing. Again, he traveled. He just didn't dress. And I really think all along, optimistically, they thought they can get him back maybe in time for the start of Big 12 game. I think Big 12 play. I think realistically, they thought TCU road game after the open week would probably be the best way for him to go. And here we are. I would be surprised if he doesn't play. And if he doesn't play, probably have to ask some questions about when, if he does come back. But I don't anticipate that being a story. Gray Setterstrom asks, I am pretty confident in our offense. However, do you think our defensive line and linebackers can hold up against the run and keep pressure on Hill the whole game, and how little depth we have in those positions? So that's going to be the key. Hill's a guy that right now has been pretty good with timing. He's kind of worked in a rhythm. He's gotten the ball out. He hasn't been harassed too much. He's dangerous when he makes plays. So if you are going to pressure him, you better keep him in the box and make him make a play that is not comfortable for him. And that means people screaming at him and arms in his face and knocking him down. You don't want him outside the pocket flinging the ball against broken down coverage. So if you're going to blitz and pressure, which West Virginia will, better finish those plays. Really, they don't get a lot of organic pressure from the defensive line. That's never been something that West Virginia's been good at in the constructs of the 3-3-5. So defensive ends, it'd be nice if they could. Realistically, you're not asking them to do a whole lot. Certainly not asking your nose guard to get pass rush. That'll be important, though. They'll be important, though, against the run, obviously. TCU's run the ball fairly well this year, certainly better than they have in seasons past. They have 3 or 4 guys that can do it. And I think that's made Hill a little bit more effective, too. They have been able to move the ball and score points with runs. Hill's a guy who's known for his arm and not necessarily management of the offense. Up until this season, been very efficient, super effective on third down. That's the best third down offense in the country. He's completing about 3/4 of his throws on third down, and a lot of them are manageable situations inside 5 yards, which means you can run it, you can pass it. If you don't set out to stop one, the other can get you, and you can't really set out to stop both without having some sort of vulnerability. So it'd be good to pressure him, to speed up the clock for him a little bit. Certainly would help if the defensive line can play better than it did against Kansas. The depth is a concern for sure. Linebackers depth there is a concern too, and those are the guys that have to get off blocks and facilitate for others, and that just hasn't happened with the frequency that the coaches have liked so far. Moving along, Dan Jones says, how does Tony Gibson address the inability to tackle the ball carrier on first impact? They went live and tackled in 2 practices last week, which is probably, again, we said this many times, why the bye week came at a pretty opportune moment in the schedule. If you have 8 games in a row, you're not going live and tackling a whole bunch. West Virginia didn't have a game last weekend, so they could devote some periods in practice and indeed for back-to-back days to tackling. But really, a lot of it is these guys know how to tackle. They didn't get scholarships and didn't get starting spots or key roles on a FBS defense by not knowing how to tackle. So you turn the film on and you point it out. And someone who wasn't balanced, who came in to make a kill shot instead of a tackle, fundamentals were sloppy. That stuff does not lie on film. Again, use your eyes. You saw some of these things yourself. Be darn sure that coaches and players understood the same thing too. You just have honest conversations with people, and if it continues, the best way to tax players is with playing time. And if they're not going to stay in gaps, if they're going to flail instead of wrapping up, they're not going to play. So that would be something I think we would keep an eye on here, but I think that they're hoping that was more exception than rule. Adam Piles is Long back this week. Health of other starters. I think Long is going to play. I don't know. Understand the reason you're asking all these questions is because there are no answers. It's not for lack of effort. Pretty much everything West Virginia does with news on injuries is with deception in mind. They just don't give you answers to questions, and if you do, I don't know how much you can trust it. We'll see. But day to day until you play a game is kind of the MO right now. Long hasn't played, so he's still day to day. By the way, this is not unique to football at West Virginia. It's not unique to West Virginia. Personnel things, coaches just like to keep quiet. Coaches are kind of control freaks, I think. Paranoia sometimes sets in, and I think there's this weird theory out there that perhaps Gary Patterson is staying up at night devising a game plan based on the whereabouts of David Long. I doubt that's true, but I think if you can keep secrets, coaches find that to be in their best interest. Health of other starters, I think Toyce Avery should be good to go. It's 3 weeks and 2 games with a finger injury. I see him on campus a bunch, and he's moving around just fine, so it's not his legs or his knees or anything like that. It's just a finger injury on his left hand, but if you're going to play safety and you're going to tackle, you kind of need 2 good hands. I believe Grant Lingenfelter did play late against Kansas. He's an offensive lineman, but he was back in action. I haven't heard anything about Kaiser White being out or Mike Daniels, so I would believe both of those gentlemen would play on Saturday and be welcome back too, especially Kaiser. He could have used him against the run in Kansas. Ashton Johnston asks, hopefully Tony got on the guys about keeping the play in front of them and filling gaps. Yeah, I would think so. Again, that's something you can just show on film. West Virginia plays a pretty, I don't want to say simple defense, but the middle linebacker plays off the nose guard. So if the nose guard goes left, the middle linebacker has to go right, and you kind of stay in your lane. If that doesn't work, you're in trouble. The 2 outside linebackers, they have to fill gaps between the guards and tackles, and if you see an outside linebacker way outside the tackle, something went wrong there. They just had some bad moments that a pretty good running back was able to capitalize on, and it just happened in frequency. Again, more often than the coaches wanted. Raymond also asks, very true, Dana hates injury questions, and I don't blame him for keeping it under wraps that David is going to play. Sorry, that's not a question. I don't mind. I just need to know who's playing in a game when he is playing. There's really no reason to be watching a game and see Toyce Avery on the sideline, not in uniform, and have no explanation for what happened or why he isn't playing, or even if he is or isn't playing. So information, exchanging of ideas like that would be useful for people covering the game. Some previously submitted questions. Loopy Hoopy asks, how do you see West Virginia beating TCU? I would think you're going to have to hit some big plays, be really solid on special teams. And again, I would really challenge Kenny Hill to take the September Heisman that he won in 2014 and seems to have maybe warmed up again this year, a guy who's had big numbers in September before and hasn't carried it through, I would challenge him to beat you. I would make sure that he's able to do in the first 4 games in the final 8. And can you do that against a West Virginia defense that maybe has been up to the task so far, but I think can complicate matters for a quarterback. So I would ask him to beat you, make him beat you, make him make the big plays and prove he is who he has been. Don't turn it over, clean play, stuff like that. But I think you have to hit some big plays on offense as well. Is the TCU press box as nice as the visiting locker room? It's okay. Have you heard anything about Jack Allison or David Israel? I've heard David Israel's played some other positions too, just to help the scout team, which is kind of interesting, and not going to get a lot of burn as the backup scout team quarterback. That's generally fallen to Jack Allison. I think there's expectations that if Will Grier isn't back, he should be in position to start next year, or at least have a lively competition with Chris Juganov. I do think sometimes Israel may play in scout team action for a more mobile quarterback, somebody who can dance around and do some things, maybe a Baker Mayfield, perhaps even Kenny Hill, just because he's more mobile, and what I hear, far more mobile than Jack Allison is. Moving on here, Earstein asks, what do you think the long-term plan is for Kenny Robinson? Does he beef up and eventually play spur or outside linebacker? Or does the staff keep him a corner? I think you have to let this experiment go and see how well it works. So far, so good. We arched our brow this week when we saw a depth chart that had him as the backup cornerback. If you had a heart palpitation there, don't worry, that was actually a typo. And here's why information and authenticity is so important. The people who do the stats on the road games for West Virginia are from Kansas. They really screwed up the starting lineups last week. They didn't have 11 players starting for offense against Kansas, and they actually had Elijah Battle starting at cornerback, which didn't happen. Well, that stat sheet makes it down to the person who puts together the depth chart for West Virginia on Sunday nights, Mondays, and he looks at it and sees that Battle started. He hasn't heard anything different, so he pencils Battle in as a starter again. So one error, we got another error, and that's how Elijah Battle became a starter for about 24 hours until the coaches nixed that and said that was, in fact, a typo. But again, I think you have to see how far this goes. So far, so good. He has great ability. I'm not going to say he has pro potential, but he's long, he can run, he's not scared, and he's finishing plays, whether it's against the run or breaking up passes. I think if you looked at the first couple of games, specifically Hakeem Bailey, didn't finish plays, didn't make tackles, didn't break on runs or pass plays as effectively as he needed to. Not that he was scared, but acts of commission versus acts of omission, so to speak. Right now, Robinson commits himself to plays better. And this is also a similar question, I guess, about Hakeem Bailey. Apologies if you've answered this question before. It seems like one that may have come up. But what do you think the disconnect is between Bailey in the offseason and Bailey in games? Just game experience. You can do all these things in practice, and you got another rep or another drill or another day of practice you can get to, especially in camp. It's different in games. It's different in practices in a game week. You don't have that safety net. You're judging every snap in practice, and especially in games too. You know, if you're not making the plays, and like I said, if you're not committing to yourself or committing yourself to the play like you have to, and you're not racking up stats or tackles for losses or PBUs or anything like that, you know, sometimes it's going to show up. West Virginia charts everything. Doug Belk has a pretty detailed tracking system for tackles for loss, pass breakups, solo tackles, going to making a play for somebody else, and it was kind of hard to ignore that Bailey wasn't doing that, and the other players were, and then especially in practice where Robinson just opened eyes quickly right away and took over that spot. Lastly, can you give any insight on what motivation Tall and Gibby are giving the defensive line to get them into shape for TCU's vaunted running offense? Let's go easy on vaunted running offense. Not sure they've played a ton of great defenses so far, but certainly balanced and effective thus far. Be interesting to see how they do without their starting center. That's going to be important. But I think motivation is just point of the box score against Kansas. Maybe mention the name Khalil Herbert. 25 to 30 times a practice. 291 yards is a tattoo that does not scrub off very easily. That's the worst rushing defense performance school history. So if you're only as good as your last game, that's not very good. Tex Ear, he asks, seems like we've got a really solid 6 in the offensive line. Kajust, McKivitz, Jones, Bosch, Sills, Linkenfelder. Who do you see as 7 and 8? Related, that unit has outperformed my expectations so far. TCU might be even more challenging up front than the defensive line than VPI. I would agree. Tech's defensive line was really big, and he was forced to kind of move people around. But Bud Foster does things differently on defense than does Gary Patterson. Gary Patterson is very active on that defensive line. They different stances, different techniques. They shift, they move, they twist, they stunt. They always have something new. When they're really good on defense, here I am knocking their pass defense, but their front is going to be very good again. If you're playing a 4-2-5, those four need to get a lot of pressure, and they generally do the job there. So, again, those 5, 6, 7 guys that you'll see probably playing defensive line throughout the game are good players and probably not much different from the best to the worst, I should say. If you're on the field for TCU's defensive line, you're probably a pretty good player. That will challenge the offensive line. 7 and 8 on the offensive line. Well, 7 right now would probably be Kelby Wickline, just because they need that swing tackle who can play too. And then Isaiah Hardy's getting every chance that he can get to be another guard. I think that's what's so good about the return of Lingenfelter. It doesn't necessitate major critical contributions from Hardy. Remember, they took the red shirt off of him. He had a red shirt year, and now he does not, unless he's magically injured, and we don't know about that, and he's suddenly able to take a medical hardship waiver. Not that that would ever happen in college sports, but maybe you don't see so much of him right now because of Lingenfelter. Maybe he gets in development situations late in games or perhaps in practice, but do you need 4 guards? I don't know about that, but it'd be interesting to see how Kelby Wickline comes along and how they spell some problems that they've had maybe for future concerns for depth at tackle. C.A. Heslop asks, how sad will it be due to a season-ending injury to lack of having a TV show a live shot of Ferns, number 7 with long hair, while talking about Greer, number 7 with glorious hair and beard? Be very sad, of course. Moving on, WVU Doke 6021 says, are the issues on defense personnel, fundamentals, or effort problems? I'll try and get specific with some of the problems. Is the defensive line going to continue to struggle to get off blocks and make plays because they're too small and inexperienced, or did they lose focus, given the opponent, leading to a lack of effort and or fundamentals? I think 28-3 probably had something to do with it. I was frankly surprised that Kansas kept running the ball, but it was effective, so they did. I would think if I was guilty of that, perhaps some players were too. But again, it just wasn't very good. They just didn't get off blocks. They engaged, and it did not disengage. Didn't move people around very much. Again, use your eyeballs. It wasn't great. I'm not sure that's been the norm. Will it be? I don't know. Probably more concerning is what offensive lines continue to do to them. Do they push them around? Do they angle them out of the way and open up creases? Who knows? Effort, talent, weight, experience, those are all variables you could probably debate and make valid points about. But I just think for one game, how to play up front was not at the level they're taught or expected to play at. Same question for linebackers and safeties regarding filling the right lane and not over pursuing. Again, they know what to do, and they just got out of their minds for some plays, and they were exposed, and that stuff happens. Again, you kind of nailed it. They just didn't fill the gaps right. They got out of position. The defense is specific to assignments of what everybody's supposed to do. You leverage outside to try to keep it inside, and if you spill it back inside, those gaps are filled, and the play can't go anywhere. But when your outside leverage players are inside and the ball goes outside, that's trouble. When your inside players trying to fill gaps are outside and leaves a cutback lane open, that's trouble. Those things happen. That's why you design counters and why players who can cut back and have good vision are successful. Ideally you don't make those mistakes as a defender, especially at the second level. But if you do, good players will catch you. And West Virginia saw a good running back on a day it wasn't at its very best on defense. Were Battle, Winfield, Bailey liabilities, which led to the team taking a chance with Robinson, or was it injuries? I think Winfield lost some time, obviously, because the finger injury, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but when he was injured and he had the surgery, he wasn't allowed to be in team meetings. They took him off the roster of 105 players. They brought in, I believe, a walk-on offensive lineman just to help out so they could have drills and more players on offense for practice. But he was out of meetings for about 10 days, I believe is the number I heard, 10 or 12 days. That's important in the development for a transfer player. The 3-3-5 is a little bit different than what he played at Syracuse. So he was trying to get taken to school in the meeting rooms, but he wasn't allowed to go because he wasn't on the 105. That slowed his progress, I think. Physically, he's fine. I think they have hopes that he can contribute more, perhaps as soon as Saturday, because TCU is going to play 8 or 9 receivers, and they're going to, run deep routes and gas the cornerbacks and then bring somebody fresh in and challenge some tired cornerbacks. So you might need 5 cornerbacks. You might need 6 cornerbacks. Who knows against TCU? So I don't think the book is closed on them. I don't think there's any concern about Battle. It's just that he's not one of their 2 best right now. Mike Daniels has been very effective and disruptive. Kenny Robinson's been eye-opener for them. So it's worked out that way where that's your 1 and 2. Nothing wrong with being 3, I guess, if 1 and 2 are so held in such high regard by the coaches. We've been over Bailey, obviously. Just probably needs more seasoning and, again, just to commit himself to plays and finish things. And finally, based on your ability to read the coach's mind, how many snaps along in every play this week? I don't know. I don't know. I think they'll help, which is what you asked too. Long's very good about not getting blocked and getting off blocks. That's his skill, which is really important on the weak side. And I think Bailey's been pretty good. Avery's been pretty good against the run so far this year. Missing him, you miss him, and you're probably not being honest with yourself if you think that Marvin Gross isn't a step back because Avery knows the bandit position and Gross hasn't played it very much. So that's the drop-off there. That's just facts. Gross is a good player, but it's a new position to him, and it takes some time, and even he admitted he made a mistake. They got beaten a touchdown against Delaware State because it's new to him. So those things can happen. I think you'll probably just be better with an addition against the run like Avery. A couple more here before I go. Let me see. Let's go. Has XP been a disappointment? Xavier Preston been okay. Not a lot of splashy plays, but I can't say that he stood out as being a disappointment. That'd be hard to quantify right now. But I think when you look at the push of his career and all the hype, maybe he hasn't lived up to the hype, but did he pay attention to hype? Did coaches buy into hype? I don't know. He might just be a pretty good player who's lived up to the expectations people had for him. Dana Mallory says, will we see more of a variety of backfield personnel in order to balance the pass versus rush? Greer looks amazing, but the receiving corps needs some people to step up. Probably. I think they really do like when they go with their 4 receiver sets, but we did see last game against Kansas, the most they have incorporated the running backs in the passing game, sometimes 2 in the backfield at once. That can be an asset for the offense, too. Something else to keep an eye on, too, was different formations, the same personnel. We talked about that a bunch, but Gary Jennings played tight end for a snap. They snuck David Sills in to play some H-back, so they went from 4 wide to 2 or 3 wide sometimes by hiding those players who are receivers at other spots. That's a way to monetize their skill and kind of catch people off guard. That can rattle a team like TCU. Do you see us winning the Big 12? If I knew, I wouldn't be working for a website. I promise you that. I'd be on a beach somewhere making these predictions. Predictions for the weekend. Give me a good game. I'm not going to pick a winner or loser. It'd be interesting. I like to suspend my preconceived notions when I'm watching games here. Who's better, Kenny Hill or Benny Hill? Well, what are we talking about? Sexy parties? Benny Hill. Touchdown passes? Probably Kenny Hill. But a good question. Finally, last one I have time for here, Ashton Johnson also asks, I also think the bad defensive numbers have been inflated by the team getting a bit bored and shutting it down, especially ECU and Kansas. Defensive play was solid against the only decent team we played. Yeah, again, if you're looking at quality opponents, they played pretty good defense against a Virginia Tech team that has acquitted itself quite well in the remaining games on the schedule. Nothing wrong with that defensive performance. And when it mattered, they throttled ECU and Delaware State and Kansas to some extent too. Really had some stretches there where they were hot, but complacency sets in. That happens with young and inexperienced players. 3-1, that's an okay habit to have. 1-3, it's a terrible habit to have. So maybe they figure that out and they can stay out of their own way in the future. One more, because Adam Snyder just popped in and he gets to be the last question. I just got here. How are the linebackers and defensive line going to hold up against conference play? They're going to need more bodies. Can now Rasheed Benton play at this ferocity for 8 straight Saturdays? I don't know. Probably. But that might take years off of his life because he has been all over the field making a lot of tackles. Sometimes he admits making mistakes by being in the wrong place, but I think he's kind of taken on the role of a fireman sometimes, but he's had to run around and put out fires and pull the kitten out of the burning building because problems pop up and he knows how to solve them. Probably be more concerned with the depth there. Is Hadari Christian going to be able to spell him? Can he play effectively? Can a guy like Adam Hensley, who's never really played meaningful snaps, a ton of special teams, but not really a lot of meaningful defensive snaps, can he come in and play 2 series and just let guys get a rest? We'll see. Those are good questions to ask, and hopefully the players will give you an answer for as soon as Saturday. Speaking of Saturday, I will be there. We will have a live and thriving thread on the message board for you, so please pop in early and often. Tell your friends, because we will be, again, live from TCU Saturday for the game. 2:30 in Texas, 3:30 in Morgantown, or wherever West Virginia's borders bind their fans. But that's a couple days from now. Rest of the week, keep an eye on us, earsports.com. Amazing content coming your way. Updates from recruits and some decisions upcoming there. And then, of course, Friday, 4-minute offensive, and then I am wheels up to Fort Worth. 25 minutes. That was a lot of words, a lot of questions. Great questions, okay answers. I'll try to do better next time, but need you to be here next time so I can live up to my end of the deal. That's all the time I have. Thank you for stopping by for 24/7 Sports. I'm Mike Casazza.